morning. On? Okay. Okay, we'd like to get started. Thanks for coming. It's my privilege and honor to introduce David Steitz from NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. He's here visiting with us at NCAR and UCAR for a couple days, and we're very glad that he's here. Thank you for coming. Currently, Dave is the Senior Public Affairs Officer for Space Technologies. He's had quite a few different jobs at NASA headquarters in his 25 years, and his full bio is on the NASA website if you'd like to see it. I had the privilege of working with Dave in Earth Science when I was at NASA headquarters, and one of my favorite days there was follow the public affairs guy around all day, and that was Dave. It was a very busy day. So I would like to publicly thank Dave for the work he did on the Columbia shuttle disaster. His hard work there was just unprecedented, and we were all so proud of him, and he handled things that people didn't want to handle. So anyway, thank you, Dave, for that. I don't know if NASA's thanked you enough, but I was there and I understood what you were doing. So anyway, without further delay, I'd like just to have Dave talk now. And thanks again for coming. We really appreciate you coming to our little town of Boulder.
Thank you, Karen. It's a very nice intro, and I appreciate everybody coming out this morning to hear me. I like to joke that I'm a public affairs officer and a spokesman for NASA, and I hate public speaking. I prefer that you guys do it. You're my talent, and I just kind of work on the written word and some talking points and press releases and things. I will point out that my first love at NASA was earth science. It was my first big assignment, working with Dr. Qasim Asrar when earth science became an enterprise. And I fell in love with doing field campaigns with earth science. I worked on a couple of great ones, especially the hurricane campaigns. We used to do some hurricane campaigns that were great fun with Ramesh Kekar, and we'd go down to Florida and fly into hurricanes with NOAA and a bunch of other agencies and universities, and it was great fun. Now I'm in a new directorate called the Space Technology Mission Directorate at NASA. NASA has pretty much 4 big chunks. We've got the Science Mission Directorate, the Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate, the Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate, and our group, the Space Technology Mission Directorate. I'll also try to fly through my slides. I know that some have suggested NASA is heavy on slides. So I tried to get it down to as few as possible. I thought I'd quickly walk through what space technology is and then talk a little bit more about communication strategies at NASA that we employ. Space technology portfolio goes from early TRL all the way to in-flight demonstrations. The recognition back at the beginning of this administration was that NASA needs to be capabilities driven, not destination driven. That was a big change for us. In the past, we had done missions that were very specific. I want to go to Mars, I want to go to the moon, I want to go to a specific location. And that's not really cost effective in times of tightened budgets. What you want for your technology group, whenever possible, is cross-cutting technologies that enable multiple capabilities. So we've been working in the Space Technology Mission Directorate on everything from early stage ground testing to suborbital flights to actual flights and testing in space. Our technology demonstration missions are the ones that go up into space. We recently tested a great low-density supersonic decelerator off the coast of Hawaii. It took a while, but we were able to get that to fly, and we're very excited about that. We're going to do 2 more flights of that. I think this kind of flying saucer-shaped thing on the top there. We'll do 2 more flights of that next summer, and then it will be ready for infusion, hopefully, into the Mars 2020 mission. Obviously, we've got a ton of challenges for deep space. For humans going to deep space, we're going to have trouble with communications and laser comm, but these are also, again, cross-cutting technologies that can be used for Earth and for many Earth science campaigns. Laser comm is a challenge. We're working on it for things like in-space propulsion and deep space propulsion. Our big focus right now is on solar electric propulsion and new SCP systems for long-duration space missions into deep space and to act as the cargo tug for things going to Mars. Human exploration, obviously, is another big chunk of NASA, and we're working on all kinds of cool stuff that will enable future human exploration, but also has dual-use application down here on Earth. We're doing a lot of interesting things with robotics and are involved in the National Robotics Initiative. That's an initiative by the administration to develop more co-robotics here on Earth to benefit manufacturing and our industrial base. So we've got R2, the Robonaut, on space station, but we're also partnering with GM on that machine for robotic use on Earth. We also recently competed and will compete again next year in the Darpa Robotics Challenge, which was a challenge to develop robots for emergency response. In terms of new hardware and stuff we've got going up, the MSL heat shield worked, was a beautiful success, and now we're trying to take it a step further with LDSD. We're doing a lot with synthetic biology and the idea of using lunar regolith or moon dust to create building material, where we would take it and feed it into additive manufacturing 3D printers that would then print out blocks of solid structure that could be used for building blocks by robots before humans ever get there to settle, so your house would be built before you get there. We're also looking at applications for that for Mars. PhoneSat has been a wonderful experiment, and I imagine you're all familiar with the advent of CubeSats. We're doing a lot with CubeSats in our small spacecraft technology program. CubeSats are small, cube-sized satellites that share common parts, for lack of a better word, where you can manufacture them for relatively cheap. NASA has a program where we will offer to launch your CubeSat for you. You can compete through our CubeSat launch initiative. We launched, I think, 70 last year for universities, for companies, for nonprofits. You apply to the program and say, I've got a CubeSat, this is what it looks like, and this is what it hopes to do, and if we can find room on a ride, either a NASA ride or a DoD ride, we'll hook you to the O-ring, and up you go, and you're deployed in space. We also have a deployer from the space station that works really well through the NanoRacks contract we've got with them. So we're doing a lot with CubeSats as smaller and cheaper ways to do some science. There's a private company called Planet Labs that was recently started by a NASA alumni from our NASA Ames Research Center that is now trying to market CubeSat Earth imagery. I think they're going to get down to 25 centimeters and market it to people like USAID, first responders, other government agencies, other governments overseas, anyone who wants very basic Earth science imagery for less than what you would normally pay the larger providers. So we'll see how the market bears there. We test, obviously. We test and we test and we test. We've had some great successes with LDSD and with the K-10 rover. We've got the Spheres spacecraft up on space station using a smartphone by Google that is now being its brain. The new Google Project Tango just went up and is going to be used to map the inside of the space station in 3D. This is where Google has taken a new version of their Android, and as you walk around, it maps around you in 3 dimensions. We see potential for that in space, and we're going to first have it do the inside of the space station, and if it works, we'll have it do outside of the space station. And I think I've already mentioned some of the advantages of solar electric propulsion. We're going to be using it for everything in the future from the space station on out. The other nice thing about advanced solar electric propulsion is it's going to add new power capabilities to existing satellites. You'll be able to plug and play these advanced 25 kilowatt solar panels to your existing satellite and hopefully get a lot more energy out of it, which I think will have a good effect for commercial missions, but also for Earth observing missions. So that's kind of a background on space technology, but now for the part that I really kind of work in is how do we tell the world about what we're doing in a changing world? Huh. My slides are moving faster than me. We started with social media as a serious effort about 8 years ago. With the advent of Twitter, we thought, you know, something's here. We're not sure what it is, but we know it's very, very popular. I use my focus group of my nieces and find out from them how they communicate. And they said, well, Twitter, of course. And I thought, there's no way you can actually communicate important work of NASA on Twitter. How do you get messaging through 140 characters that could somehow capture what we're doing? But we stuck our toe in the water and tried it, and it took off and has done phenomenally well. We have a huge Twitter following. I've got some stats later on. And then we realized, what about all the other social platforms? That's just one of them. Why not expand to the others? And in our office, we all looked at each other thinking, well, that's nice, but we don't have the money and we don't have the people. You know, standard crisis of any organization. It turns out you don't need money for most of social media. You do need people, but if spread around your organization with people who are interested in doing it, it can become fun and something they'll do for you without prompting and prodding. We also stick to our well-known traditional stuff, photos. A picture tells 1,000 stories. We are gifted by having some of the best photographers on Earth, but also I would suggest you can have your own folks do their home videos and their home shots and be just as powerful. We post everything to our Flickr account, which has gotten millions of visitors over the years. Flickr is, we purchased a professional account with them, which I think was $100 a year. We were able to get our general counsel to sign off on that so that we have unlimited volume. And in return, we've trained the news agencies to go to our Flickr site to see what's new at NASA. We get far more volume on Flickr than we do on our own websites. When we post on a NASA site, we can post all the pictures we want. They'll get 10 times the volume if you put them on Flickr. We've just developed a following, and it's turned out to be a really great tool for getting still imagery out there. It can take a little time because you do want to metadata tag your imagery, so that's someone's work. But again, it turns out it often is a labor of passion. We're lucky to have NASA TV. I was explaining a little earlier, NASA television was given to us as an engineering capability. It's not meant as a public affairs tool. We just got ownership of it. NASA TV was started when the space shuttle program started because our engineers needed to be able to see the spacecraft going up in good television so that they could see how their machines were working. Then we realized, well, we've got this 724 capability and someone should be thoughtfully putting stuff on it, so they gave it to public affairs to put stuff on it. Admittedly, programming on NASA TV can be anything from fantastic to mind-numbingly dull, but we try, and it's a great outlet for getting our message out. It's carried by cable companies around the country. We make it available for free, and any cable company that wants it can take it. Once again, though, social media snuck up on us. YouTube gets us far more visibility. We take everything we put on NASA TV and we just move it over to our YouTube account, and we get millions more views than we do on our broadcast of NASA television. People go to YouTube for everything, and it's a great resource. There again, we went to YouTube and got a professional account for, I think it's $100, and post everything there. And YouTube makes it 508 compliant, which is another great thing, helpful for us. In terms of some of the more traditional stuff, we do a lot with blogs. I had always doubted the impact of blogs and whether it was worth the time to get people to write a blog, and would anyone really read it? Would anyone really follow it? It turns out that yes, people do read blogs that we post and follow it and engage in it, especially if you allow comments. We will open up the comments section and then respond back. And it's fascinating, some of the discussions you can get on a blog page, whether it's with a senior official or our web team. We open it up to anyone, pretty much anyone who wants to write a blog for NASA. If they're a NASA employee, we'll say, sure, if you think it's interesting. Our communications policy says that any NASA employee anywhere can talk to anyone at any time. This was a result of our censoring of science and Jim Hansen back in the early 90s, which resulted in a communications policy that is now almost the gold standard for federal agencies. So we encourage our employees to talk about their work in any way they want, in any forum they want. They can have their Twitter accounts, they can have blogs. We invite them to take advantage of the Office of Public Affairs if they want our help, but that's not a requirement. We don't edit blogs for our contributors. So blogs are another way that you can get your message out. We oftentimes use them when we want to put out a soft policy statement instead of a news article or a press release about NASA's position on the upcoming budget. That you wouldn't put out a press release on that because it wouldn't help you in any way. But you could have the head of your organization put out a blog saying the budget is going to look tough in the coming years. Unless we get support from our community, we may not get the money we need to do the things we want to do. So we found blogs are a good platform for conveying different types of messages with targeted communities. Oftentimes when our administrator does a blog post, we'll alert reporters to it. One of my jobs will be to let our trade press know, hey, the NASA administrator just put up a blog about topic X, whether it's the budget or an anniversary of a historic event or what have you. So blogs do have a place in today's modern world. We also have started treating bloggers as reporters. If you're a blogger and we see that you've got a sizable following, we'll invite you to press conferences and let you sit in the audience and participate. Other social media platforms, Facebook, we're now at a little over 6 million likes. Facebook has been a growing activity with us and a learning activity. We originally had our Facebook page, National Aeronautics and Space Administration was what you would look under. And that was up until about a month ago, and we had 2 million likes, and we were thinking we were doing great. And then we went and met with the Facebook people and said, how could we do better? And they just laughed and said, no one thinks of you as the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. They call you NASA. Flip it. Just use NASA on your page. We flipped it, and in 1 month we got 4 million more likes because people are searching for NASA. They're not searching for National Aeronautics and Space Administration. With our NASA page, again, it's the key to success is interactive and spread out. We let all the different projects post something to the NASA page through their public affairs person. We have a small group, maybe 8 public affairs officers who have the car keys to this platform. If you have something you want on the NASA Facebook page, you let us know, or we'll put something on tied to a press release, tied to a communications plan campaign, where we feature what you're working on, and then we monitor and we respond to comments. One thing you can't do if you're going to be using Facebook or any of the social media platforms is post and walk away. You lose your audience and it becomes a stagnant, kind of useless platform. Part of this is gaining community. With social media, you get to tell your story and interact, and it's about engagement. Here, as of this week, we have 7 million Twitter followers, which are people who follow us and love us. That's extraordinary for a federal agency. I think we're still a little bit ahead of the White House. We have an ongoing race with them. The community for NASA Socials is out of this world. For a NASA Social, we've invented something. We didn't know what to call it, so we called it a NASA Social. Originally, we called them tweet-ups, where we had Twitter followers come to rocket launches and come to field campaigns and get unique access to watch something cool. But as different social media platforms grew, we realized it wasn't fair to call it just tweet-ups. It's not just people who use Twitter. It's the Facebook folks and the Google Plus folks and the bloggers and anyone who uses any sort of social media to communicate. So we've now created a community of followers and have NASA Socials at major agency events. They don't have to be major events, they just have to be interesting events. We're lucky because we have rocket launches, but we've also done NASA Socials at field campaigns around the country. We've done NASA Socials at museum events, where we're unveiling something at a museum, when we've done something with astronauts and memorials for Buzz Aldrin showing up somewhere. We'll invite a handful of social folks to come along. These are people who want to participate. They want to be part of the NASA family, and we're letting them in to become our advocates and our evangelists. They get unique access. They come for days on their own dime. We don't pay for anything. They show up, they get their own hotels, and then we tell them where to be at 9 a.m., and then we give them a tour of something interesting. And they get excited, and they get jazzed, and then they start being our advocates. And what's, to me, fascinating is they keep coming back. It's not a one-off where these people will have one experience and then they leave. They'll come back over and over again. We have to restrict numbers of people just because of our own resources, so we try to keep NASA Socials to about 150 people. On any given one, we'll have applications between 2,000 and 4,000. It is not random. First we call them, we check and make sure they have a legitimate account. We find out, do they have an actual Twitter account or an actual Facebook page, and then how many followers. If you have 3 people, that means you're just kind of trying to get into a NASA event. If you have 500 or more, come on down. Some we reach out to. We have some celebrities that love us. Seth Green is an actor who is a big NASA fan. He'll show up to our NASA Socials on his own dime just because he's a big fan of ours. We'll reach out to some of the primary influencers, Mashable, some of the other major Twitter accounts and major influencers within the social sphere and the blogosphere, and get them. We always invite the bloggers who are blogging about us, whether they love us or hate us. I want the people who hate us to come. I want them to have exposure to us. I want them to be able to have a dialogue and discuss with our leadership what we're doing. It's the worst thing, in my opinion, is when somebody writes mean things about you but doesn't call and ask, can we talk about it? I want that sort of engagement. We've won over a lot of people in the blogosphere by saying, come and participate. You know, we want your questions. So you can bring people together into socials and show them something interesting. We did a tour of the Goddard Space Flight Center Satellite Control Center. Now, if you work in satellites, it's not a big deal. You've seen a satellite control center. If you're a member of the public, it's extraordinarily exciting. It's very cool, and we let people take pictures, and for our field campaigns, we'll let them mingle around with Media Day and climb around stuff and take pictures. We took a little CubeSat to a launch recently and let each person get their picture taken holding a CubeSat. Huge success, just massively popular. Now you can argue what is the return on that? There are companies that actually measure that stuff, private sector companies that can measure stuff. Our LDSD campaign out in Hawaii this past month, a company came back and said we had $680,000 worth of placement on Twitter. I don't know what that means, and I know it doesn't translate to Fed to mean anything other than it's a nice number. I guess next year I'll try to get $1 million worth. I don't know how to measure it, but it means to me more that somebody's listening and that we were able to engage audiences that way. So I encourage everybody to think about what a NASA social in their area might be. The flip side of that is it really has to be interesting and engaging. You know, it has to be something where people are getting a unique experience that they're going to take home with them and remember for a lifetime. And sometimes a stale lab is not going to be that experience, but actually seeing science being done might be that experience. We do them virtually and online. Now NASA, for all of our press conferences and press briefings, take questions from the audience via Twitter. We not only have reporters in the room, but we also have folks asking questions from all over the world via Twitter. We stream all of our press conferences over the web. People, if they have access to the internet, can ask a question. We have someone in the audience who will go through and say, okay, we've got a question. We screen out the crazies, but we pick legitimate good questions and answer them, and we do answer every question. We may not answer it during the briefing, but our policy is to go through, and every interaction we got during that event must be answered, because again, it's about building the community and building your credibility as being a member of the social community. And you know, how do we make them successful, memorable, and powerful? We give them access. People love having access to the experts. If you can get experts available to talk to people about their work, people in the social media realm will swarm to them. You know, it's knocking down the borders between the old school reporters and the next generation of communicators. We have to get outside of, I gave it to a reporter, therefore my job is done. Or I told a journalist, therefore the news is out. Really, there's an extraordinary new audience out there that you can reach directly with your news, who I would argue is far more influential when it comes to how the general public perceive your work, and in turn how Congress and the folks who dispose of a budget perceive your work. So again, it's moving for NASA Socials. It's taking folks from being fans and followers and consumers to advocates, evangelists, creators, and collaborators. We do have another thing that we're working on is the idea of collaboration. We're doing a lot in collaboration through our websites with everything from Send us your ideas, whatever they may be, on any given topic, to join us through platforms like Incentive and contests and challenges, where we're offering prizes for solutions. We're trying to tap into the citizen scientists and the citizen inventors to give us solutions that otherwise we'd have to pay for at a much higher rate, or that aren't so important that we would go after them right now, but we still want the answers. So we're doing things with agency grant. We're doing an agency grant challenge on asteroids, but we're also doing other smaller challenges and competitions where we offer smaller prize dollars for solutions to ongoing tough problems. Our ultimate end game, I think, through all of this is more participatory exploration. And we've struggled to try and get our arms around what does that mean. And after wrestling with that for months, we decided to stop wrestling, start doing. We'll know it when we find it. Let's just keep looking. So we've been trying these different avenues to bring in people to be citizen scientists and citizen inventors to participate in our work. Hubble has had some success with the folks who can download to their computer and help us look for things, in their spare time, because there's just so much data. We're doing the same with asteroids. We're going to be announcing an asteroid challenge of the same thing, where we're going to make data available and you look for asteroids on your computer. We're doing prizes and competitions. Centennial Challenges program is a program of challenges where we do challenges for robotics. We're doing one for UAVs. We're looking at doing one for a deep space CubeSat, where the winner would get their CubeSat sent off into deep space, which would be pretty cool. So there's a lot of areas that we're doing innovative and engaging partnerships in. I guess in terms of NASA public affairs and general, how does the machine work? We're actually not that big. We have about a dozen people at our headquarters shop in media relations. We have 10 field centers. NASA's currently at an $18 billion budget, which is a huge budget, but that's a flatline budget. Flat is the new good. We will probably dip a little below that. We rely heavily on leveraging the folks at our centers and within our programs to help us. We've recently started to try and merge the outreach and communications shops together rather than have them stovepiped and separated. Our project offices for the past 10, 15 years have taken small amounts of money and created their own outreach teams, which is fine, but they weren't coordinated with the agency and the agency big picture messaging. And anyone, when you step back and think about it, it makes sense to show where you fit within your organization. So we've been working together, bringing teams together, saying we're not trying to have you stop your work on your project, your one mission, but instead we'd like to see you folded in to the bigger picture NASA and some of the big campaigns. I was saying this year we started an Earth Right Now campaign, which was just a messaging campaign so that everyone at NASA, as they go through their work, when they're thinking their public communications and outreach strategies, how can they weave in the phrase Earth Right Now? Can you tie yourself to that? Because that's a major key component to what we do at NASA. My group, the Space Technology Group, has Technology Drives Exploration. Fairly straightforward, easy to do. And we're trying as an agency to come up with these overarching messages and themes that can be used by everybody all across the directorates so that we come across with a more unified message and a clear message of what the agency is trying to do. It's not easy, and oftentimes there'll be some issue of, well, you're having an Earth event on the day that I was planning on having a Mars event. well, okay, we can separate those two if we have some time, but sometimes reality doesn't allow it, and we're going to be having something landing on Mars the same day something's happening on Earth. We just have to make sure we complement each other. So with all that said, I think it'd probably be best to just get any questions you have about pretty much anything. You know, I'm from headquarters and I'm here to help. Do you have questions about NASA communications or?
Is this on? Yeah. So I'm Randy Russell. I work with the sort of K-12 education group here, very much involved with educational technology and that sort of thing, websites, online courses, games and simulations, things like that. I was curious, as you sort of mentioned how the firm had put this dollar value on, you know, your portfolio or your efforts and that kind of stuff, and it's hard to make any sense out of that, you know, it is a challenge to figure out what these things mean, but also metrics of some sort are important to sort of drive your decisions of, you know, how much energy do we put into our Twitter stuff versus our Facebook stuff versus whatever. So I'm curious what you guys do to make those decisions, what sort of things you think about. And then also in terms of the powers that be, the people, you know, upstairs who control your budget or, you know, that you have to impress, you know, they may have no idea whether 20 million or 200 million Twitter, you know, references are good. Which things seem to be valid in talking to that sort of audience? What resonates with those?
Well, we're very lucky because while we may look huge to you, we're actually small. You know, we're a small federal agency. We're only 18,000 people, and then probably another 100,000 contractors. But the way we work, we have a daily report up to the NASA administrator. And in the daily report, we list where we are in the news, hot topics, what's going on in the world, but we also give statistics of how many places we showed up in print, in broadcast, and we keep weekly reports on our web stats, on how many unique visitors we got to the NASA homepage. We average 6 million unique visitors a day to the NASA homepage. So that 6 million people are coming every day to see what's on the top page of NASA. That's nice. With Facebook, we run the stats by what we get, and we also talk to Facebook and say, how are we doing? We're very lucky because Facebook and Google actually are friends of ours. We have Space Act agreements with them, where NASA, as a young agency, we have these magical, mythical things called Space Act agreements, where we can have agreements with companies and organizations where no exchange of funds are given, but something of benefit comes from both sides. With Google, they've been helping us with our analytics. With SpaceX or with Facebook, they've been helping us with our page to make it look better and be more effective. In terms of reporting up and what's working and what's not, when we have major stories, we'll run an analytics program that our in-house library has that goes out and scurries the web and comes back with statistics of impact and peaks. Things like you can measure the number of views of a video on the web pretty easily. And if we make that video part of a rollout of a campaign or of a news event, you can see whether it worked or not in comparison to, and we've been gathering these data for the past couple of years, and we've had some pretty amazing spikes for things like MSL, you know, Mars landing. So we have some kind of points of reference to see how effective we're being in terms of impact to the audience on our different efforts. We've been able to get management buy-in by having them participate. We, for instance, incorporate now the NASA social folks in all of our press briefings and all of our events. And never have I seen a happier NASA administrator than when you put him in with the NASA social people. He may not be fond of talking to reporters, but when you put him in with real people who have paid on their own dime to come and learn about NASA, he will spend an hour in a room like this with just them and say, hey, I'm Charlie Bolden, ask me your questions. And he'll come out feeling great because those are real wonderful people who came to learn more about NASA. And usually within that group, we'll be reaching anywhere between 10 million and 100 million people. If you look at the multiplying fact of, let's say in the group of social folks, I've got one person who has 800,000 followers, and I've got another person who has 40,000 and another person who has 75,000. If you take 150 people and their average number is 30,000 people, you can multiply it out and figure out how many millions of people their tweets are getting to, and so on and so on. Now, is that a hard statistic? Is it a hard data? No, but I'd argue it's of value until we know otherwise, because we are reaching an audience that otherwise isn't going to be tuning in and isn't going to be getting to us. It's spreading virally our message directly with no filters, and it's also engaging us in a conversation that hasn't happened in the past. So I think our management believes in it. Our program folks are okay with it if it doesn't cost them anything. It's always, well, how much time and resources will it take out of my mission? And the answer is usually not much, if at all, because your public affairs folks can help make these things happen. Or if you're a project and it's just a matter of tweeting, that's one person. Just have them do it 2-3 times a day, or if just once a day, but be sure to follow that account and respond and make it interactive. Feedback. If you're just feeding out, you're just broadcasting, you're not going to get a following. If you interact, you're going to start building a community, and you'll be surprised at how quickly that community can grow. So for statistics, we do gather them. We provide them weekly to senior management, daily in some areas. And we've gotten buy-in that it's of value. And it's virtually no cost, because you've got the cost of your belly button, but that person, it doesn't take much. I'm required to tweet 5 times a week, and I can do that from anywhere in the world. And great. And there's 12 of us, so there's 60 tweets guaranteed to go out this week. And we try to make them fun, engaging. That's the other thing. We've been very careful to make sure that this is not just propaganda. It should not be the company line. It can be fun things. It can be anything, just to keep the community engaged. And, we'll talk about other people's work. We'll talk about cool science findings. Did you hear about what the Europeans recently did? So I think the value of it is proven by reporting up statistics and showing our leadership, putting them in the spotlight and having them interact. We've also been tinkering with Google Plus and Google Hangouts, and we've done that with all of our senior leaders. They haven't liked it. It's been like pulling teeth. You get them in front of a screen, a tiny screen, and they're used to TV studios, and you say, and now you're going to talk to floating little windows from around the world, and there's may only be 36 people. And is that worth my time? Yes, we believe it is, because there again, you're reaching new audiences. And it's those new audiences that are valuable, and it's more direct communication with the public. We, like every federal agency, we struggle with, why are we here? Why are we relevant? How do we make ourselves relevant? A key part of that is to have that interaction with the public and get their feedback. The public think NASA has gone out of business because we no longer fly the space shuttle. And NASA doesn't exist anymore. Didn't you shut your doors? You don't fly the shuttle anymore. That's, to us, terrifying, that people think that's all we do. And that, to us, is a challenge to say, no, you know, we do earth science, we do earth system science, we do space science, we do aeronautics, we do technology. We continue to fly humans to the space station. How do you make people realize there's a space station? Lately, the astronauts have been tweeting. They've gotten onto the tweeting bandwagon, and it's huge. People love to be able to tweet to an astronaut and get feedback. Okay. Yeah. Perhaps long-winded, but
kind of a simpler question. The one stream that I've been sort of watching gets a lot comments probably every 10 seconds, and I'd say a third of them are not English. Do you make an attempt to reach to an international audience? How do you address the language issue?
for the language issue, on Facebook, we try to use Facebook Translate and translate the incoming and then respond in English. We have not tried to respond in foreign language because we do not have the talent. We have had some success. We have 2 people in public affairs at NASA, maybe 3, who are fluent in Spanish. And those 3 we employ. We put them to work constantly, whenever we can, through social media platforms, but also through media interviews and things like Google Hangouts in Spanish overseas. But we have not been able to address the vast number of incoming foreign comments. We've had some problems where Iran regularly tries to hack our Facebook page and put up political propaganda, and it's hard because then we all 12 of us get to spend hours a day blocking and blocking and blocking and blocking, and as soon as you block someone, a new name pops up. You know, they just keep repeating accounts. We've had to take down our page once for that, for political reasons. But the majority of comments that come in on, at least on Facebook or on Twitter, are very short and are easy to translate using Google Translate. And if they're thoughtful, we'll respond. But for the longer ones, or for ones that would require content analysis by an expert, another thing we do is we try to engage our experts. Public affairs doesn't just make up answers for everything. If we get a good, hard technical question, we use a piece of software, Enterprise CoTweet, which is a software management system for corporate Twitter accounts that you can route and assign an incoming tweet to an expert. So if I got something on atmospheric aerosol transport in the upper tropopause, I could say, not Dave, send it off to my upper atmosphere person with a note on top of it, can you answer this? Oh, and by the way, can you answer it in 140 characters? So we do try to answer as much incoming as we can. Our first priority is going to be to the English-speaking audience of the U.S.
I have a question for Dave. First, thanks for your talk. That was very informative. Just wondering, you'll be here with us, thankfully, for a couple days. By tomorrow afternoon, after you've seen some of the wonderful things we do, will you be tweeting about your trip to NCAR and the important work that we are doing?
I've had a couple of thoughts on that, actually. One way to boost NCAR's following on Facebook is NASA can do was it a Follow Thursday? It's Throwback Thursday, Follow Friday. We can do a Follow Friday, which we do for our sister agencies and organizations. I worked with the AFRL on a project, and they had, I think, 12,000 people following them on Facebook, and they just casually said, we'd love a Follow Friday from you. So I did that, and they were up to 100,000 people in one day. Because NASA does this again, I'm somewhat old and new to this technology, but you do a Follow Friday where you plug other websites that are cool, and then your followers look at that other website. They go to it and say, oh, well, NASA says that NCAR is cool. So then they go and look at NCAR's site, and then they start following you. That's an easy way to gain followers, especially within a given community like a science community or a tech community. So there's lots of ways that NASA can help cross-pollinate. Another thing we try to do whenever we're working in things like field campaigns is use our hashtags and our handles, the Twitter handles and hashtags, to promote partnerships with others. At NASA and at NCAR are doing cool stuff, hashtag frappe. You know, you can get a surprising amount of data into 140 characters. It may not look like English, but to the followers within the community, it actually can make sense. I've had a lot of fun trying to do that with some of my field campaigns, where I'm trying to condense down into a short tweet a hard technical idea of a flying saucer taking off. I would put in a plug also for plain language. That's something that I've had years of experience with scientists and engineers, and it's difficult for both sides of the aisle. But when we took our LDSD out to Hawaii and we're getting ready to launch, all the public affairs people said it looks like a flying saucer, because it does. You know, it's a flying disc. So we started calling it a flying saucer. And the engineers and scientists were mortified, because of course it's much more than that. And how dare we degrade the image of their work into a flying saucer. And the world press picked up on it. We got more coverage when we used the phrase flying saucer than any project I've worked on in a decade. And we'd even start getting phone calls from around the world. Are you flying that flying saucer today? Is NASA's flying saucer going up today? Where can we get the best view of the flying saucer? Are you going to have footage of the flying saucer? Unbelievable. And yeah, I'm the first to admit, flying saucer does not capture the important technology behind supersonic inflatable decelerator or hypersonic system. I mean, but it's worth it to me if I can get. We got ABC, NBC, and CBS News that night. All of them, all three networks, and then CNN for 2 days, talking about the flying saucer. To me, that's a win, because the stakeholders who we depend on, the Congress mainly, and the president and the administration, all saw that, and they were like, oh, NASA did something cool. Without that catchphrase, I'm not sure how much coverage we would have gotten unless it had failed. You know, the rule of thumb with media is if you fail, you'll get TV. If you don't fail, you might get TV. The news hole is very small, and every day you're fighting to get into it. If you don't have some kind of a catchy hook to get into that news hole, other than a failure, you may be lost. And that's where pictures and video and short is better, and relevance to my life today. You know, how does a flying saucer going to Mars help my life today? Well, this technology also can be used to land large payloads back on Earth. We'll be able to bring things in from space station. One day we might be able to bring in spacecraft that we want to repair or salvage.
Who do I give it to my boss?
Dave, I also want to thank you for a really good talk. You mentioned that you have a relatively small staff, and having a distributed effort throughout the organization is really important. And I'm curious about the open communication policy, where any NASA staff member can communicate any way they want. Other than having that policy, are there things that NASA does or that you do to encourage that or to support the people who are doing it?
One of the things let's see how to, one of the things we've learned is that public affairs can't know everything all the time, much to my boss's dismay. He would love us to know everything that's happening all the time. There's just too much going on. So we can't always know what the best story is that's going on. We rely a lot on the project managers and the program leads to feed it up. If it's something, quote, big, a field campaign or a launch of something or a demonstration of something, I'll usually hear about it and we'll make conscious decisions to, hey, we should play that up. The flip side of that is when some researchers just don't want to play with public affairs, or they will make news that they never thought was going to be news, where they'll go to a conference and announce a finding that they just thought was ho-hum, that, so on Tuesday we discovered life on Mars, and then I went and made some coffee and I discovered it using spectroscopy. Well, the lead there's life on Mars, and a large audience will pick that up. So we were sometimes playing catch up to folks going out and just making news. Sometimes we're trying to coordinate it. Other times we're encouraging people, especially people that, when we have groups of people doing something, we want every voice to be heard. We want those hometown stories to go out. We struggle with diversity. We want as much diversity in our stories as is in our workforce. A lot of times the project lead will decree that they're going to be the only voice to be heard, and we discourage that because we want as many voices to be heard as possible. An example of cringe for our policy succeeding was we have a researcher down in Houston, a guy named Harold White, who has been working on his own project on warp drive. He's been working on warp drive for years. He's been getting a little bit of Center Innovation Fund money, and he is a one-guy shop for warp drive. It's not an agency priority right now because it doesn't fit into the propulsion technologies that we see are viable in the near term or even in the 10 to 100 year term. The propulsion people at NASA overall say that's just not going to happen anytime soon. You have to change some basic laws of physics. And so Hal every year goes out with his own announcement. And this year he got some beautiful artwork, some very nice science fiction type artwork, showing how his warp drive would work if it existed. And he released the pictures to his website and a select group of reporters he knew who would be interested. Suddenly, around the world, NASA announces warp drive project. NASA ready to move out on warp drive. Well, there's a situation where he is a researcher that we fund, who works for us, and that is what he's working on. We were put in an awkward position because we do not want to say the guy is crazy. We do want to say our focus is on other technologies, and that Hal's work is Hal's work, and you should talk to Hal about it. And so we'll have incidents like that regularly, but I don't see those as a harm or foul. That's fair. If you're doing your work and it's legitimate NASA work, by all means talk about it. Similarly, we've had folks working for years on low energy nuclear reactors, LENR, and debatably, it's just not there. But every year, one of our researchers will say, I'm there, I just need a few $100 million more. We do have a lot of researchers who will try policy by press release, and it always fails. Trying to get money for projects by making half announcements and saying, if you send me more money, I'll get to my end point. Usually managers don't like that. So I don't know if I actually answered your question, though.
Different context, that there may be many people who would have a lot to say but need some encouragement. And if there are things that you do that are actually designed to encourage more people to participate and communicate.
You know, we encourage people within the program offices to participate. We're always looking for ways to get our people out into the public. We do a lot of soft events like museum events where we ask for volunteers, and that's a great way for people to interact and get comfortable with the public and the press in a soft audience. You know, so we'll take volunteers and do things like the Intrepid Museum up in New York, where we need people to staff events. Really, though, finding the talent tends to be at the program and project level with their public affairs officer at the field centers. Our field centers work with our field projects, and then as they get bigger, they bubble up to a headquarters person. We encourage every employee to play, and we regularly remind employees, you're our ambassadors, you need to go out and tell our story. Right now, we're in the process of working on some public speaking slideshows that we're going to make available to all employees on a intranet, so that if you want to go talk to your church, your neighborhood, your Cub Scout troop, your neighborhood advisory council, whoever, you will be able to download and have at your ready a 14-slide "This is NASA" with some beautiful, pretty pictures and some moving animation designed specifically to give a general agency overview for any employee, regardless of where they are in the food chain. That's one of the things that employees have been asking us for, saying, I want to do this, I just don't know how to. So we're trying to put together this slideshow and plug and play. And that's been successful. I've done it. I've taken it out and test-driven it. Giving a talk to a neighborhood group of retirees. I've done a nursing home as well as the Retired Foreign Intelligence Officers Association. Who knew? Only in Washington. And they asked good questions. And so we're putting together those sorts of tools to help with outreach. But part of it will be having employees come forward and saying, I want to do it. And we're working hard to make those tools available, because it really is true that every employee is the ambassador of the organization. I would much rather never have me seen and always have someone who's doing the real work seen. You know, the scientists and the engineers who are doing it. Thank you for coming. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.